Heartless Millionaire Humiliated the cleaning lady. But when he saw the photo in her wallet, he screamed and fell to his knees. The corner office of the Hawthorne Group's 47th floor commanded a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline, a daily reminder to Daniel Hawthorne that he stood above it all. As the last amber rays of sunset glinted off neighboring glass towers, he swirled the crystal tumbler of 18-year-old Scotch in his hand, savoring both its smoky aroma and the sight of his empire below. At 38, Daniel had everything a man could want. At least, everything a man like him believed worth wanting. The Forbes profile last month had called him ruthlessly brilliant, a description that had made him smile. It wasn't wrong. Mr. Hawthorne, his assistant, Melissa, appeared at the doorway, designer heels clicking against marble. The Jenkins contract projections are ready for your review, and the Tokyo office is on standby for your call in 20 minutes. Daniel nodded without turning from the window. Tell Tokyo I'll need 30. And have Davies and Preston stay late. I want their input on the Asia expansion before morning. Yes, sir. Anything else? That's all. He dismissed her with a flick of his wrist, a gesture so practiced it had become reflexive. When the door clicked shut, Daniel finally turned to his desk, a massive slab of black walnut that had once belonged to his grandfather. From here he could make or break companies, futures, careers. The thought pleased him. His phone buzzed. A text from his date for the charity gala tonight. Some model or actress he'd met at last week's fundraiser. He'd have Melissa cancel. Work was more important. 6 hours later, the Hawthorne Group building had transformed. Gone were the bustling executives and the constant hum of high-stakes business. In their place came silence, punctuated only by the occasional squeak of a cleaning cart and the soft shuffle of practical shoes. Linda Caldwell moved carefully around the executive suite, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces. At 56, every movement was measured, deliberate, the product of years navigating spaces where she was meant to be invisible. The lines on her face hadn't been earned by laughter, but by years of hard work and quiet longing. She saved Daniel Hawthorne's office for last. She always did. Linda dusted his awards and accolades with special care, lingering over the framed magazine covers featuring his stern, handsome face. In the empty office, she allowed herself to look openly at him in a way she never could when they occupied the same space. Those rare moments when they crossed paths, him staying late, her arriving early, were both blessing and torture. 20 years searching, she whispered to herself, the confession swallowed by the hushed emptiness of the room. 3 years, watching from the shadows. Her hands, chapped from industrial cleaners, gently polished the surface of his desk, careful not to disturb a single paper 21 years ago. Her hands had cradled him, for all of 2 minutes. Before he was taken away, she'd counted his perfect fingers and toes. She'd whispered her love into the delicate whirl of his ear. And then, Dorothy Hawthorne had entered the room with a blank check and a threat. Linda's reverie was interrupted by voices in the hallway. Panicked, she quickly gathered her cleaning supplies. Daniel Hawthorne wasn't supposed to be here this late, but before she could slip away, the door swung open, revealing Daniel flanked by 2 other executives. All 3 men wore their power like expensive cologne, unmistakable, overwhelming. Daniel stopped mid-sentence when he saw her. His eyes, so like his father's, flickered over her as if scanning an inanimate object. "We'll need this room cleared," he said flatly. "Now?" Linda nodded, keeping her eyes down. "Yes, sir, just finishing up." One of the other executives, Preston, Linda thought his name was, snickered as she hurriedly collected her things. "Hold up," Daniel said, his voice taking on the amused tone it always did when he was about to make someone the butt of a joke. "Gentlemen, take note." Linda froze, her back to them, knowing what was coming. It wasn't the first time. "See this," Daniel continued. "This is why you push your kids to excel. So they don't end up like..." He paused, gesturing vaguely in her direction. "What's your name?" "Linda, sir." She kept her eyes down. "Like Linda here, scrubbing toilets at midnight." Preston laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. "My son thinks his computer science homework is tough. I should bring him here for perspective." "Exactly." Daniel nodded, loosening his Italian silk tie. "The greatest motivation, work hard or end up with that life." Linda clutched her cleaning cart, knuckles white, each word pierced deeper than they could know. but she maintained her mask of subservience. It had taken her too long to secure this job, to get close to him. She couldn't risk losing it now. "Actually, my son," she began, then stopped herself. What was she thinking? She couldn't mention her real son, the one who stood before her, cutting her down with casual cruelty. Instead, she mumbled, "I'll be out of your way, sirs," as she hurried toward the door. Her worn leather wallet slipped from the pocket of her uniform, spilling its contents across the gleaming floor. Credit cards, a few crumpled bills, and an old photograph. "Jesus Christ," Daniel muttered, exasperated. Linda scrambled to gather her belongings, mortification burning her cheeks as she reached for the scattered items. Daniel bent down, surprising everyone, including himself, and picked up the photograph that had slid near his handmade Oxford shoes. He intended to hand it back without a glance, a perfunctory gesture that would allow him to return to business. But something caught his eye, a small, glinting object in the picture. "Sorry, Mr. Hawthorne," Linda said, her voice barely audible as she reached for the photo. "Thank you." But Daniel didn't release it. Instead, he was staring at the image, a much younger Linda standing next to a teenage boy. Around the boy's neck hung a small gold medallion with an intricate design. A falcon perched atop a shield. "Where did you get this?" Daniel's voice had lost its mocking edge, replaced by something sharp and urgent. It's my son," Linda stammered, pulse racing. "Please, I need to finish my rounds." "The medallion," Daniel insisted, pointing to it in the photo. "Where did he get this?" The other executives exchanged confused glances. But Daniel was too focused to notice. With trembling fingers, he reached into his own pocket and withdrew a nearly identical gold medallion, worn smooth in places from years of being handled. "This has been in my family for generations," he said, voice low and intense. "So I'll ask you one more time. Where did your son get this?" Linda's world tilted sideways. After years of careful planning, of silent observation, the moment had come in the worst possible way. She'd imagined 100 scenarios for revealing the truth, but never this. Never with witnesses, never with him looking at her with suspicious anger. "It was my mother's," she whispered, the words hanging in the suddenly too quiet room. "I gave it to my son on the day he was born." Daniel's face drained of color. The medallion in his hand suddenly felt burning hot against his palm. "That's impossible," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Something ancient and buried was stirring to life in his consciousness. Questions about his appearance that never quite matched his parents', whispered conversations that stopped when he entered rooms as a child, and the strange behavior of his grandmother on her deathbed when she'd pressed this very medallion into his hand. Preston cleared his throat awkwardly. "Daniel, should we reschedule this?" But Daniel Hawthorne wasn't listening. He was staring at Linda Caldwell, as if seeing her for the first time, the foundations of his carefully constructed world beginning to crack beneath his feet. "Everyone out," Daniel commanded, his voice barely controlled. Preston and Davies exchanged glances before silently retreating, closing the door behind them. The expansive office now felt suffocatingly small with just Daniel and Linda inside. "Sir, please," Linda began. "Sit down." Daniel pointed to the chair across from his desk. It was the same chair where CEOs and high-powered executives sat to negotiate deals worth millions, now occupied by a cleaning lady with trembling hands. Daniel remained standing, pacing along the wall of windows, the city lights below twinkling like distant stars. He held both medallions now, the one from his pocket, and the one he'd practically ripped from the photograph, identical in every detail. The silver-winged falcon with eyes of amber stone, perched upon a shield bearing the letter H. "This belonged to my grandmother," Daniel finally said, holding up his medallion. "She gave it to me before she died. Said it was a family heirloom to be passed down through generations." His eyes narrowed. "So explain to me how your son has one." Linda folded her weathered hands in her lap. After decades of silence, the truth threatened to choke her. "The boy in that photo isn't my son," she said quietly. "It's my nephew, but he's wearing my son's medallion. That doesn't answer my question. The medallion was my mother's," Linda continued, her voice steadying. "She gave it to me when I turned 16. I put it around my baby's neck the day he was born, before," her voice cracked, Before he was taken from me. Taken. Daniel's throat tightened around the word. I worked for the Hawthorne family once, Linda said. For your parents, Catherine and Robert, and for Dorothy, your grandmother. Daniel froze, the medallion suddenly heavy in his palm. I was 18, Linda continued, her eyes distant with memory. Your grandmother hired me to help around the house. I was young, naive. Benjamin Hawthorne was. A faint smile crossed her lips. He was different from the rest of your family kind. Saw me as a person, not just the help. Daniel leaned against his desk, struggling to process her words. Benjamin was my uncle. He died before I was born. He was your father, Linda said simply. The words hung in the air between them. Daniel's knees weakened, and he lowered himself into his chair. That's a lie, he said, but without conviction. Catherine Hawthorne was my mother. Robert was my father. Linda shook her head slowly. Catherine couldn't have children. After several miscarriages, the doctors told her it was impossible. When I became pregnant with Benjamin's child, Dorothy saw an opportunity. She paid me to disappear, and she gave my baby, you, to Catherine to raise as her own. No, Daniel whispered, but flashes of memory were already surfacing. Catherine's prolonged depressions, her drinking that had worsened over the years, the way she would sometimes look at him with such guilt in her eyes. Why should I believe you? He demanded, anger surging back. You're nobody, a cleaning woman with a convenient story. Linda's face showed no reaction to the insult. She'd endured far worse in her pursuit to be near her son. Your blood type, she said quietly. It's AB negative, isn't it? Rarest type in the world. Neither Catherine nor Robert had it. But Benjamin and I do. Daniel's mouth went dry. She was right about his blood type. And the birthmark, Linda continued. Small, shaped almost like a crescent moon, on your right shoulder blade. Daniel's hand involuntarily moved toward his shoulder. How could she know about that? That doesn't prove anything, he said. But his voice had lost its edge. I can prove it, Linda replied, reaching slowly into her pocket. She withdrew a folded piece of paper and placed it on the desk between them. My DNA test results. I did it 3 years ago, when I finally located you. That's how I got this job. To be near you, even if you never knew who I was. Daniel stared at the paper without touching it. Why now? Why wait 20 years to find me? Then 3 more to say anything. Linda's eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. I never stopped looking. Dorothy threatened to ruin my life if I ever came near you. She had power, connections. When I finally found you, I was afraid. You had this perfect life. And I'm just... She gestured at her uniform. Daniel stood abruptly, walked to the window, and pressed his forehead against the cool glass. Outside, Chicago continued its rhythmic existence, oblivious to his world crumbling around him. My mother, Catherine, died 5 years ago, he said, his voice hollow. Car accident, she'd been drinking. I know, Linda whispered. I read about it. I'm sorry. She wasn't a bad person, just caught in Dorothy's web, like all of us. Daniel turned back, his face a mask of controlled emotion. And Benjamin, my father. Linda's face darkened. They said it was an accident. A sailing mishap, 2 months after you were born. But Benjamin was an expert sailor. He'd told me he was planning to come find me, to make things right. He wanted us to be a family. Daniel returned to his desk and picked up the DNA test results. Harvard educated, with an MBA from Wharton, he understood the science, could interpret the markers and percentages. The evidence was overwhelming. Who else knows about this? He asked, his business instincts taking over. No one alive, as far as I know, except maybe Edward, my grandfather. Daniel's head snapped up. Linda nodded. Dorothy's husband. He was always in the background. But he knew everything that happened in that house. Daniel's mind raced through the implications. Edward was still alive, though frail at 87, living in the family's Lake Forest estate. If anyone could confirm or deny this story. I need time, he said finally. This is impossible. I understand, Linda said. Rising from her chair, I've waited 21 years. I can wait longer. As she turned to leave, Daniel found himself studying her features, really seeing her for the first time. The shape of her eyes, the line of her jaw, looking for pieces of himself. "Why didn't you just come to me directly?" he asked. "Why work here, cleaning my office for 3 years without saying anything?" Linda paused at the door, a sad smile on her lips. "I wanted to know you, even if you didn't know me, to see what kind of man my son had become." The smile faded, "And I was afraid. The Hawthornes took you once. I was terrified they'd find a way to take you from me again." She reached for the doorknob, but Daniel's voice stopped her. "The medallion?" he said. "If you put it around my neck as a baby, how did your nephew end up with it in that photo?" "That's not your medallion in the photo," Linda explained. "It's a replica I had made years ago. I gave it to my sister's son so I could have something to look at, a shadow of what might have been." With that, she slipped out the door, leaving Daniel alone with a lifetime of questions and 2 identical medallions gleaming under the harsh office lights. Daniel didn't go home that night. After Linda left, he sat in his darkened office for hours, the 2 medallions lying side by side on his desk like silent accusers. When dawn broke over Lake Michigan, he was still there, haggard and hollow-eyed, his mind racing through a labyrinth of memories and doubts. He canceled his meetings and drove to his penthouse apartment, where he showered mechanically and changed into fresh clothes. Then, rather than returning to the office, he headed to his late mother's house in Lincoln Park. He'd kept the property after Catherine's death, unable to sell it despite rarely visiting. Now he understood why. The house stood quiet and elegant behind its wrought iron gate, preserved like a museum to a life that may have been built on lies. Daniel disarmed the security system and entered, inhaling the faint scent of Catherine's perfume that somehow still lingered after all these years. He went directly to her study, a room he'd avoided during the estate settlement. Catherine had spent countless hours here during her increasingly frequent depressive episodes. Often with a tumbler of bourbon at her elbow, Daniel had always attributed her melancholy to the pressure of being a Hawthorne. Now he wondered if it had been guilt all along. The mahogany desk dominated the room, its surface bare except for a silver-framed family photo, Daniel at his Harvard graduation, flanked by Catherine and Robert, all 3 smiling for the camera. Daniel picked it up, studying their faces with new eyes. How had he never noticed how little he resembled either of them? He set the photo down and began methodically searching through drawers. Most contained only mundane items: stationery, financial documents, reading glasses. But in the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a false panel, he discovered by accident, he found a leather-bound book with no markings on its cover. Catherine's journal. Daniel's hands trembled as he opened it. The first entry was dated 20 years ago. May 15th. Daniel turned 18 today. I wanted to tell him everything. The words were on my lips as he blew out his candles, but I couldn't destroy his day. Robert says we should never tell him, that it would only hurt him to know. But the older he gets, the more he looks like Benjamin. Sometimes when he smiles a certain way, I see his father so clearly it breaks my heart all over again. Daniel's breath caught. He flipped through the pages, scanning entries. November 10th. Had another dream about the day they brought him to me. So tiny with that medallion around his neck. Dorothy said it was bad luck, wanted to throw it away, but I couldn't. I hid it in my jewelry box until he was old enough to keep it himself. It was the only thing he had from her. February 3rd. The guilt is unbearable some days. I love him as my own. He is my own. But I stole another woman's child. Dorothy says the girl was paid well, that she agreed to everything. But I saw her face when they took him. No money could compensate for that loss. Daniel slammed the journal shut. Unable to read more, he paced the study, fighting the urge to throw something, to release the anger building inside him like a pressure cooker. After several minutes, he forced himself to continue reading. The entries grew darker as the years passed. Catherine's struggles with alcohol became more prominent, her guilt more consuming. July 8th. I saw her today. At least I think it was her. A woman watching Daniel's rowing competition from across the lake. Something in the way she stood. So still. So focused. By the time I reached the spot, she was gone. I'm probably imagining things. Dorothy assured me years ago that she'd left the country. March 22nd. Robert and I fought again about telling Daniel the truth. He says it would destroy the family, ruin the Hawthorne name, as if a name matters more than the truth. But he's right about one thing. Telling Daniel now might make him hate us, and I couldn't bear that. Daniel continued turning pages, following the increasingly disjointed account of his mother's, of Catherine's, inner turmoil. He paused at an entry from 6 years ago, December 1st. Edward came for dinner tonight. He looked at Daniel with such cold calculation. Sometimes I think he sees Daniel only as Benjamin's replacement, another heir to groom for the Hawthorne Group. He never loved Benjamin as a son, only as a successor. When Benjamin died, Edward barely showed grief, just immediately focused on training Robert to take over the company. And later, Daniel. I wonder sometimes about Benjamin's accident. Edward was with him on the boat that day. The only witness. Daniel froze, reading the passage again. Edward had been with Benjamin when he died. He'd never heard that detail before. The official story had always been that Benjamin had been sailing alone when a sudden storm blew in from the lake. He read on, increasingly disturbed by Catherine's suspicions. January 18th. Found a photo of Benjamin today while looking for tax documents. The resemblance between him and Daniel is uncanny. Now that Daniel's reached his 30s, Edward noticed it too. Made an odd comment at the board meeting about how the Hawthorne blood always shows itself eventually. I caught him staring at Daniel afterward with that calculating look again. The final entries in the journal were from shortly before Catherine's fatal accident, October 30th. I've made a decision. Daniel deserves to know the truth. All of it. Edward will be furious. But I don't care anymore. I've hired a private investigator to find Linda Caldwell, if she's still alive. Daniel should meet his real mother. November 10th. The Pie found her. She's been in Chicago for years. All this time. So close. I'm going to contact her tomorrow. Then I'll tell Daniel everything. The next page was blank. 3 days after that final entry, Catherine had driven her car off Lakeshore Drive and into the water. The official report had cited her blood alcohol level as the cause. But now Daniel wondered if there was more to the story. He closed the journal and leaned back in Catherine's chair, overwhelmed. According to these entries, Catherine had been planning to reveal everything just before she died. Had it truly been an accident? Or had someone, Edward, ensured her silence? Daniel retrieved his phone and searched for news articles about Benjamin Hawthorne's death. The yellowed Chicago Tribune report from 38 years ago was brief. Benjamin Hawthorne, 26, heir to the Hawthorne industrial fortune, drowned yesterday in a sailing accident on Lake Michigan. His father, Edward Hawthorne, survived the incident. Witnesses reported a sudden squall that capsized their sailboat. Edward Hawthorne was rescued by a passing vessel, but Benjamin was swept away by the current. His body was recovered early this morning. Edward, the only witness, the only survivor. Daniel's phone rang, startling him. It was Melissa from the office. Mr. Hawthorne, I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's a situation at the office. Madison is here saying she has an emergency board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning regarding succession planning. She says you approved it, but it's not on your calendar. Madison. His cousin, Edward's granddaughter from his daughter's side, always ambitious, always resentful of Daniel's position as CEO. I never approved any meeting, Daniel said sharply. Tell her I'll be there in an hour. He gathered Catherine's journal and left the house, his mind racing. How had Madison known to make her move now? Unless someone had told her about Linda, unless someone knew the truth was finally surfacing. As he drove toward the Hawthorne building, Daniel realized that the secrets he'd discovered reached far beyond his parentage. They threatened the very foundations of the empire he'd thought was his birthright, and possibly implicated his grandfather in murder. Madison Hawthorne stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room, a sleek silhouette against Chicago's skyline. At 34, she embodied the Hawthorne aesthetic, elegant, poised, and utterly ruthless. When Daniel entered, she turned with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Cousin," she greeted him. "Thank you for making time." "Cut the crap, Madison," Daniel snapped, tossing his briefcase onto the conference table. "What's this about an emergency board meeting?" Madison's smile didn't falter. "Just some routine succession planning. Grandfather Edward asked me to get the ball rolling." She tilted her head, studying him. "You look terrible. Rough night." Daniel ignored the question. "Since when does succession planning constitute an emergency?" "I'm not planning on going anywhere. Plans change," Madison replied smoothly. "Circumstances change. Lineages change." The deliberate emphasis on her last word made Daniel's blood run cold. She knew something. "Whatever game you're playing, I'm not interested," he said, gathering his briefcase to leave. "Preston called me last night," Madison said casually. "He mentioned a rather interesting encounter in your office. Something about a cleaning lady with a medallion." Daniel froze, his back to her. Of course, Preston had talked. The executive was firmly in Madison's camp. Always had been. Preston should mind his own business, Daniel finally replied, turning back to face her. "Family business is my business," Madison said, her smile fading, "especially when it concerns the legitimacy of the current CEO." "Legitimacy," Daniel repeated, a dangerous edge to his voice. Madison approached, arms crossed. "You may have fooled everyone else, but I've always known you weren't a real Hawthorne. Something was off." Grandmother Gloria had her suspicions too. Her eyes narrowed. "Is it true? Are you the cleaning lady's son?" Daniel fought to keep his expression neutral despite the rage boiling inside him. "You're treading on very thin ice." "Am I?" Madison laughed, a brittle sound. "The board might be interested to know that the man running the Hawthorne Group isn't a Hawthorne at all, just the bastard child of the help." Before Daniel could respond, his phone chimed with a text. He glanced down to see Edward's name on the screen. "Come to Lake Forest. Today. We need to talk." Daniel pocketed his phone and fixed Madison with a cold stare. "Cancel your meeting. Whatever you think you know, you don't know the whole story." "Oh, but I will," Madison replied, confidence radiating from her. "And when I do, I'll make sure everyone who matters knows it too." The drive to Lake Forest gave Daniel time to cool his temper. If not his thoughts, the Hawthorne estate sprawled across 5 acres of prime lakefront property, a monument to old Chicago money with its limestone facade and manicured grounds. As a child, visits to his grandparents had been formal. Intimidating affairs now, Daniel realized. Edward had never shown him the warmth a grandfather might show his grandson, because he'd always known Daniel wasn't his flesh and blood. Celia, Edward's longtime nurse, met Daniel at the door. "He's in the sunroom," she said quietly. "He's having a good day, but don't excite him." Edward Hawthorne sat in a wheelchair by the windows overlooking Lake Michigan, a tartan blanket across his knees despite the room's warmth at 87. He remained imposing, thin but straight-backed, with a full head of white hair and the same piercing blue eyes that Madison had inherited. "Finally decided to visit the old man, have you?" Edward's voice was surprisingly strong, belying his frail appearance. Daniel took a seat opposite him. "You texted." "I came. Always straight to business." Edward nodded approvingly. "A Hawthorne trait, that, is it?" Daniel asked pointedly. Edward's gaze sharpened. "Ah, so it's happened at last. The woman found you." "Her name is Linda," Daniel said. "Linda Caldwell." "I remember her name perfectly well," Edward replied. "Pretty little thing back then. Benjamin always did have an eye for pretty faces. Never mind the consequences." "So it's true," Daniel said, unsurprised but still feeling the impact of this confirmation. "Benjamin was my father." Edward waved a gnarled hand dismissively. "Biologically, yes. But Robert raised you. Catherine loved you. You are a Hawthorne where it matters. In how you were shaped, trained, educated. All built on a lie. Built on necessity," Edward corrected. "Catherine couldn't have children. The Hawthorne line needed an heir. When Benjamin stupidly got that girl pregnant, Dorothy saw a solution." His lips curved in what might have been admiration. "My wife was nothing if not practical." "Practical," Daniel echoed incredulously. "She tore a child from his mother's arms. She secured the future of our family legacy," Edward countered. "And she compensated the girl generously." "Did she compensate her for Benjamin's death too?" Daniel asked coldly. For the first time, Edward's composure slipped. "What are you implying?" "I know you were with him on the boat that day," Daniel said, "the only witness to his so-called accident." Edward's face hardened. "Be very careful, boy. You're crossing into dangerous territory." "Catherine suspected you," Daniel continued, watching Edward's reaction closely. "She wrote about it in her journal. She believed you might have had something to do with Benjamin's death." "Catherine was an alcoholic with an overactive imagination," Edward snapped. "Benjamin's death was a tragedy. Nothing more. I lost my son that day. Your son who was planning to find Linda and claim his child, me," Daniel pressed. That would have been quite the scandal for the Hawthorne name, wouldn't it? Edward's hands gripped the arms of his wheelchair. You sound just like him sometimes, he said, almost to himself. Benjamin and his misplaced idealism. He didn't understand what was at stake. And what was that? Everything. Edward's voice rose, his composure cracking. The company was at a critical juncture. We were about to go public. A scandal involving the heir apparent, and some nobody housemaid would have tanked our stock before it ever traded. Billions lost. The work of generations destroyed. So the Hawthorne fortune was worth more than Benjamin's happiness. Worth more than my right to know my real mother. Edward leaned forward, suddenly looking every one of his 87 years. You've done well, haven't you? Harvard, Wharton, CEO by 35. Would you have had any of that if you'd been raised by a penniless single mother with no connections? The question hit Daniel harder than he wanted to admit. Before he could respond, Edward continued. Benjamin was weak, sentimental. He would have thrown everything away for a pretty face and a romantic notion. Dorothy saved this family's legacy when she arranged for Catherine to raise you. And Benjamin's accident, Daniel asked quietly. Was that Dorothy's arrangement too? Edward's face went blank. I've answered enough questions for one day. I'm tired. Madison knows, Daniel said. About Linda. She's calling an emergency board meeting. A flicker of something, alarm perhaps, crossed Edward's features before he regained control. Madison is ambitious, but she's not ready to lead the company. Don't worry about her. She seems pretty confident. Edward smiled thinly. I've outlived everyone who thought they could outmaneuver me, Daniel, including your father. Remember that? The threat hung in the air between them, neither subtle nor deniable. Daniel stood. I'll see myself out, as he reached the door. Edward called after him. The woman, Linda. What does she want? Daniel paused. Nothing. She worked in my building for 3 years without saying a word. She just wanted to be near her son. Something like confusion crossed Edward's face. That's not possible. No one is that selfless. Maybe that's why you never understood Benjamin, Daniel replied. Or me. Back in his car, Daniel sat staring at the Hawthorne mansion, processing the conversation. Edward hadn't explicitly admitted to causing Benjamin's death, but his evasion spoke volumes, and his casual dismissal of Linda's loss, of Daniel's own right to know his origins, had awakened a rage Daniel could barely contain. His phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Hawthorne. A woman's voice. Unfamiliar. This is Esther Williams from Janitorial Services. I'm calling because Linda Caldwell didn't show up for work tonight, and she's not answering her phone. She listed you as her emergency contact last week, which is unusual. But when did you last hear from her? Daniel interrupted, a knot forming in his stomach. Yesterday. She was supposed to start her shift 2 hours ago. Daniel started his car. Text me her address. As he pulled away from the Hawthorne estate, he couldn't shake the chill that had settled over him. Edward's words echoed in his mind. I've outlived everyone who thought they could outmaneuver me. Linda's apartment building stood in stark contrast to the Hawthorne estate. A modest 3-story walk-up in Pilsen, with peeling paint and security bars on the lower windows. Daniel parked his Audi. Immediately out of place on the street of used Hondas and ancient pickup trucks, the super let him into Linda's apartment after Daniel convinced him it was an emergency. She never misses work, the man confirmed. Real quiet lady, keeps to herself. The apartment was small but meticulously clean, furnished with second-hand pieces lovingly maintained. No Linda, but no signs of struggle either. Daniel moved through the rooms, unsure what he was looking for until he found it. A handwritten note on the kitchen table. Daniel, if you're reading this, I had to leave suddenly. I received a warning. Don't worry about me. I've survived worse. There's a storage unit at Public Storage on Cermak, Bar U247. The key is taped under the sink. Everything I've saved about you is there. Be careful. Linda. Daniel found the key and was heading for the door when his phone rang. Madison again. I've just left grandfather's, she said without preamble. He told me everything. The board meeting is still on for tomorrow morning. Madison. Save it, Daniel. I've already spoken with the major shareholders. Once they learn the CEO of Hawthorne Group is the illegitimate son of a maid rather than a Hawthorne by blood, they'll vote with me. You're finished. Daniel ended the call without responding. Edward had obviously decided Madison was his best option for maintaining control. The old man was playing both sides. At the storage facility, Unit 247 revealed a small space packed with neatly labeled boxes. Daniel was unprepared for the emotion that swept through him as he realized each box corresponded to a year of his life. Daniel, age 5. Daniel, age 12. Daniel, college years. Linda had documented his life from afar, collecting newspaper clippings of his academic achievements, photographs cut from school yearbooks and society pages, programs from events he'd participated in. One box contained nothing but research notes, addresses, private investigators' reports, dead ends in her search for him. In the box labeled Hawthorne Family, Daniel found old newspaper clippings about Benjamin's death, Dorothy's obituary, and legal documents, including a copy of a settlement agreement between Dorothy Hawthorne and Linda Caldwell, dated just 2 weeks after Daniel's birth. The yellowed document stipulated a payment of $250,000 in exchange for Linda relinquishing all rights to her child and agreeing to leave Chicago permanently, a pittance for the Hawthornes, though likely a fortune to 18-year-old Linda. But she'd signed it under duress, a handwritten note in the margin revealed. "They threatened to have me declared unfit if I didn't sign," Dorothy said. "No court would give a child to a penniless teenager over the Hawthornes." She was right. Daniel sat on the concrete floor, surrounded by the evidence of his mother's decades-long vigil, her refusal to abandon hope of seeing her son again. The contrast between Linda's devotion and the cold calculation of the Hawthornes was stark and damning. His phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the boat dock behind the Art Institute. 1 hour, come alone. Information about your mother. Both of them." Daniel hesitated, suspecting a trap. But if there was any chance of finding Linda, he gathered the most important documents, locked the storage unit, and headed downtown. The lakefront path behind the Art Institute was nearly deserted at dusk. Daniel approached the small dock cautiously, scanning for threats. A solitary figure waited on a bench. Not Linda, but a woman in her 60s with streaks of gray in her dark hair. "Mr. Hawthorne," she called. "I'm Celia Ramirez, Edward's nurse." Daniel recognized her from earlier that day. She nodded. "I've worked for your grandfather for 15 years. Before that, I worked for Catherine. You knew my mother." "Catherine, I mean, both of them," Celia said. "I was a junior nurse when your birth mother worked in the Hawthorne house. Linda and I were friends." Daniel sat beside her, hunger for information overriding caution. "Do you know where she is now?" "Safe, for the moment. She called me yesterday." Frantic, someone left a threat under her door. A note saying, "Disappear again or else." She recognized the handwriting. Whose was it? Gloria Hawthorne, Madison's mother, Edward's daughter. Daniel's mind raced. Gloria. What's her connection to all this? Gloria was very close to Dorothy, her mother-in-law. "Your great-grandmother, when Benjamin died and you were given to Catherine and Robert, Gloria was part of the deception. She stands to lose a great deal if the truth comes out. Because of Madison's claim to Hawthorne leadership," Daniel realized. Celia nodded. "But there's more. Catherine left something for you before she died. She never got the chance to give it to you herself." From her bag, Celia withdrew a sealed manila envelope. "She gave this to me for safekeeping. Made me promise I'd get it to you if anything happened to her. After the accident, I couldn't bring myself to deliver it. Edward watched you so closely then." But now, Daniel opened the envelope with unsteady hands. Inside was a letter and a small leather-bound book, different from the journal he'd found earlier, this one with Catherine's initials embossed on the cover. The letter was brief. "Daniel, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I've failed to tell you the truth myself. I've lived with this secret for too long, and the guilt has eaten away at my soul. You deserve to know who you really are. You were born to Linda Caldwell and Benjamin Hawthorne. Dorothy and Edward took you from Linda and gave you to Robert and me to raise as our own. I was unable to have children, and the arrangement seemed like a miracle, until I saw the devastation on Linda's face. That image has haunted me for years. I've loved you as my own son, Daniel. Nothing can change that, but I can no longer participate in this deception. My private investigator has located Linda. I'm going to meet with her, then tell you everything. If anything happens to me before I can do this, please know I never meant to hurt you. The enclosed diary contains the complete truth. including my suspicions about Benjamin's death and Edward's involvement. Forgive me if you can. With love always." Catherine Daniel looked up at Celia, his throat tight. "Catherine's accident. It wasn't an accident, was it? The brake lines were tampered with," Celia confirmed quietly. Catherine had scheduled a meeting with Linda for the next day, somehow. Edward found out. "How could you know that and say nothing?" Daniel demanded. "Edward made it very clear what would happen to anyone who spoke up," Celia said, fear evident in her eyes. "But I can't stay silent anymore. Not after what I overheard today." "What did you hear?" "After you left, Edward called Gloria. He told her to take care of the problem permanently. I think he means Linda, Daniel. Gloria has connections to some dangerous people through her second husband." Daniel stood abruptly. "I need to find Linda. She's at my sister's house in Aurora," Celia said, writing down the address. "But be careful. Gloria will have people watching you." "Why are you helping me?" Daniel asked. "You're risking everything." Celia's eyes filled with tears. "I helped hide the truth about Catherine's accident. I can't live with another death on my conscience." She pressed Catherine's diary into his hands. "Everything you need to know is in here, including what really happened to Benjamin on that boat." As Celia walked away, Daniel opened the diary to the first page. There, paperclipped to the inside cover, was a faded photograph he'd never seen before. Benjamin and Linda, young and in love, her hand resting protectively over her pregnant belly, his arm around her shoulders. They were laughing at the camera, radiating joy and hope for the future, a future that Edward Hawthorne had violently derailed, leaving 3 lives shattered in his wake. Morning sunlight spilled across the Hawthorne Group's boardroom as executives and board members filed in, murmuring among themselves about the unexpected meeting. Daniel watched from the head of the table, outwardly calm, despite having slept only 2 hours after returning from Aurora at dawn. He'd found Linda safe at Celia's sister's house, their reunion a muted affair given the circumstances. There hadn't been time for the deep conversation they both needed, only enough to formulate a strategy for today. "You're looking unusually composed," remarked Preston as he took his seat. "Madison seemed certain you wouldn't even show up." Daniel gave him a thin smile. "I never miss board meetings, especially ones about my company's future." Madison entered last, alongside Gloria and Edward. Gloria Hawthorne Reynolds still cut an impressive figure at 64, her silver blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her eyes, Edward's eyes, cold and calculating. She'd remarried after her husband's death 2 decades ago, to a man rumored to have mob connections. Daniel had always kept his distance from his aunt. "Daniel?" Gloria nodded coolly as she helped Edward into his seat. "How resilient of you to join us?" Before Daniel could respond, Madison took control. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on such short notice. I've called this emergency session to address a serious matter affecting the leadership and future of the Hawthorne Group." She activated the presentation screen, displaying the company's organizational chart with Daniel at the top. For over 30 years, the Hawthorne Group has operated under a simple principle: family leadership, from Edward to Robert, and now to Daniel. A direct line of Hawthorne men has guided this company to prosperity. Madison's gaze hardened. But what if that line is broken? What if the man who leads us isn't a Hawthorne at all? Murmurs rippled through the boardroom. Daniel remained still, watching. "I have evidence," Madison continued, "that Daniel Hawthorne is not the biological son of Robert and Catherine Hawthorne, but rather the illegitimate child of Benjamin Hawthorne and a housemaid." She paused, allowing the bombshell to detonate across the room. Board members exchanged shocked glances. Several began whispering urgently to each other. "If true," Madison pressed, "this revelation calls into question Daniel's right to lead this company, as the board charter specifically states that the CEO position is reserved for direct Hawthorne descendants." "That's quite an accusation," remarked Janet Wong, the longest-serving board member. "What proof do you have, Madison?" Madison smiled triumphantly. "I have witness testimony, DNA evidence, and confirmation from Edward Hawthorne himself." She gestured to the old man, who sat stone-faced at the far end of the table. "Grandfather, would you care to address the board?" Edward cleared his throat. "It is true that Daniel is biologically Benjamin's son, not Robert's. This arrangement was made to protect the family after an indiscretion by my late son, however." He raised a gnarled finger. Daniel was legally adopted by Robert and Catherine, raised as a Hawthorne, and has led this company admirably. The charter refers to Hawthorne descendants without specifying bloodlines. Madison's smile faltered slightly. But surely the intent doesn't matter in legal documents. Daniel finally spoke, his voice steady. Only the precise language, and technically, I am a Hawthorne descendant. Benjamin was my biological father. A technicality, Madison snapped. You've built your entire career on a lie. Have I? Daniel stood, commanding the room's attention. I've increased company value by 340% since becoming CEO. Our stock price has tripled. Every person in this room has become wealthier because of my leadership. He looked directly at Madison. Can you say the same? Several board members nodded in agreement, but Madison wasn't finished. She distributed folders to everyone present. These contain financial documents showing irregular transactions between Hawthorne Group accounts and offshore holdings controlled by Daniel over the past 3 years. Nearly $30 million has been diverted to these accounts. Daniel's mask of composure slipped. That's absurd. The evidence suggests otherwise. Madison cut in. Which raises an important question. Has Daniel been embezzling from the company to fund a secret payoff to his biological mother? The boardroom erupted with voices. Daniel glanced at the financial documents, immediately recognizing them as forgeries. Sophisticated ones, but forgeries nonetheless. These are fake, he declared. Anyone with accounting experience can verify that. Our CFO already has, Madison countered. He confirmed the irregularities this morning. Daniel turned to the CFO, Richard Hamlin, whom he'd personally hired 2 years ago. The man wouldn't meet his eyes. Bought and paid for, Richard? Daniel asked quietly. Hamlin shifted uncomfortably. The transactions appear legitimate, Daniel. I'm sorry. Edward thumped his cane on the floor. Enough of this circus. Madison, you've overstepped. The board isn't going to unseat a successful CEO over unproven allegations. I agree with Edward, Janet Wong intervened. While the parentage issue is surprising, it doesn't affect Daniel's legal standing. As for the financial accusations, we'll need a proper audit before taking any action. Madison's face flushed with anger. By then it could be too late. He could empty the company coffers and disappear with his cleaning lady mother. The room fell silent at her vicious tone. Daniel seized the opening. I think we've just witnessed the real motivation behind this coup attempt, he said calmly. It's not about protecting the company. It's about Madison's ambition and her contempt for anyone she considers beneath her station. He withdrew Catherine's diary from his briefcase, placing it on the table. If we're exposing family secrets today, perhaps we should discuss Benjamin Hawthorne's death. Not an accident, according to Catherine's documentation, but a murder orchestrated by Edward to prevent Benjamin from claiming his son, me, and marrying Linda Caldwell. Edward's face drained of color. Gloria half rose from her seat. How dare you? My father would never. Catherine believed otherwise. Daniel continued, unperturbed. She documented her suspicions extensively, along with evidence suggesting her own fatal accident occurred the day before she planned to tell me the truth and introduce me to Linda. The boardroom had gone deathly quiet. Edward seemed to have aged another decade in minutes, his hands trembling on his cane. This is monstrous slander, Gloria hissed. Catherine was an alcoholic with delusions. I have witnesses, Daniel interrupted, and physical evidence. Would you like me to continue this discussion? Or should we table Madison's motion and address company business? Janet Wong broke the tense silence. I move that we postpone any discussion of leadership changes pending a full investigation of all allegations raised today. Seconded, added another board member quickly. All in favor? Janet asked. Hands rose around the table, more than enough to pass the motion. Madison remained standing, her carefully orchestrated coup crumbling before her eyes. This isn't over, she said through gritted teeth. Actually, it is, Daniel replied, gathering his papers. For now, at least. I suggest you consult with legal counsel before your next attempt to defame me. He turned to address the board. I apologize for this disruption to our schedule. If there's no further business, I have a company to run. As the room began to clear, Edward gestured for Daniel to remain. Once they were alone, except for Gloria, who hovered protectively near her father, Edward spoke in a low voice. You're playing a dangerous game, boy. Accusations of murder aren't easily walked back. Neither is attempted character assassination, Daniel countered. You backed Madison's play. That was a mistake. I merely confirmed facts about your birth, Edward said smoothly. The financial allegations were Madison's invention. Daniel leaned across the table. We both know what you're capable of. Catherine knew too. Did you really think her diary would never surface? A muscle twitched in Edward's jaw. Catherine's fantasies prove nothing. Perhaps not alone, Daniel agreed. But combined with witness testimony and forensic evidence from Catherine's car, the police might find it compelling. Gloria stepped forward. Are you threatening my father? I'm promising consequences, Daniel corrected. For Benjamin, for Catherine, for the 20 years Linda spent searching for her son, for the 3 years she spent cleaning my office just to be near me because she was still afraid of what your family might do. Edward and Gloria exchanged glances. Something unspoken passed between them. What do you want? Edward finally asked. Daniel smiled without warmth. We'll discuss terms later. For now, call off your dogs. Linda is under my protection now. As he walked out, Daniel could feel their eyes burning into his back. He had won this round, but the war was far from over. Madison was dangerous, but Gloria was deadly, and Edward, even in his diminished state, remained the most formidable opponent of all. Outside the boardroom, his phone buzzed with a text from Celia. Linda's gone, left a note saying she couldn't put you in danger, didn't say where she was going. Daniel cursed under his breath. The Hawthorne empire might be temporarily secure, but he had just lost something infinitely more precious. 3 days passed with no sign of Linda. Daniel hired private investigators, the same firm Catherine had used years earlier, but Linda had disappeared completely. She'd withdrawn her modest savings, left her apartment, and vanished, just as she had 21 years ago, only this time voluntarily. Daniel stood at his penthouse windows, watching a storm roll in across Lake Michigan. The dark clouds matched his mood perfectly. Despite maintaining his hold on the company, the victory felt hollow without Linda. Each hour that passed increased his fear that Gloria had somehow gotten to her. His phone rang. Celia's number. You need to come to Lake Forest, she said without preamble. Something's happened with Edward. What is it? He had another stroke last night. He's asking for you. Says he needs to tell you something before it's too late. Her voice lowered. He sent Gloria home, insisted on it. Daniel arrived at the Hawthorne estate 30 minutes later. Speeding through the rain-soaked streets, Celia met him at the door, her face drawn with worry. He's in bad shape, she warned. The doctor says it's just a matter of time. She led Daniel to Edward's bedroom, a cavernous space dominated by a massive 4-poster bed where the old man lay propped against pillows. Oxygen tubes in his nostrils. He looked shrunken somehow. The formidable presence diminished to fragile bones and translucent skin. You came. Edward's voice was barely above a whisper. Wasn't sure you would. What do you want? Daniel remained standing at the foot of the bed. Edward gestured weakly to a chair. Sit, please. Not much time. Daniel reluctantly sat, noticing a medical apparatus he hadn't seen before. Some kind of recording device connected to Edward. Cardiac monitor, Edward explained, following his gaze. Records everything, even conversations. A ghost of his old cunning smile appeared. Insurance policy of sorts. Against what? Gloria? Madison? Edward's skeletal hand moved in dismissal. They think, I don't know what they're planning. He drew a labored breath. Need to set records straight before I go. Daniel leaned closer despite himself. About Benjamin, about my father. Edward closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. Yes, about the boat. What Catherine suspected was true, though Daniel had already believed it. Hearing the confession from Edward's lips sent a chill through him. You killed your own son. Not intentionally. Edward's voice strengthened slightly, as if unburdening himself provided renewed energy. Fight on the boat. Benjamin said he was going to find Linda, claim you, marry her, create scandal. I tried to reason with him. So you what? Pushed him overboard during an argument? Edward nodded almost imperceptibly. Storm was coming, waves high. Thought he could swim to shore, but current. Too strong. His breathing became more labored. Watched him go under. Didn't help. God forgive me, I didn't help. Daniel felt numb, the confirmation of his suspicions bringing no satisfaction. And Catherine, did you arrange her accident too? Not directly. Told Gloria that Catherine was planning to reveal everything. Gloria took initiative. Edward's eyes grew distant. Never wanted Catherine hurt. Liked her. Felt sorry for her. Sorry enough to let her raise another woman's child under false pretenses. Daniel's voice hardened. Sorry enough to drive her to alcoholism with guilt. Edward didn't answer directly. Family legacy was everything. My father built Hawthorne from nothing. Couldn't let Benjamin destroy it for a pretty face. Linda wasn't just a pretty face, Daniel said. She was the mother of his child. She loved him. Love, Edward scoffed weakly. What's love against centuries of building? Against responsibility, Benjamin was weak, like his mother. You're stronger, more like me. I'm nothing like you, Daniel said coldly. More than you think. Edward's lips curved in a faint smile. How many lives have you crushed, building your empire? The difference is, I never pretended to be noble about it. The accusation struck uncomfortably close to home. Daniel had indeed been ruthless in business. Hostile takeovers, strategic bankruptcies, layoffs justified as streamlining. People had lost livelihoods because of his decisions. Where is Linda now? Daniel demanded, changing the subject. Did Gloria do something to her? Edward shook his head slightly. Don't know. Gloria has resources, connections through Reynolds, but she wouldn't move without my approval, which you gave when you told her to take care of the problem permanently. Edward's eyes widened slightly. Celia, he muttered. Should have known. He struggled to sit up straighter. Wasn't about Linda, was about Madison. She found evidence, embezzlement, real evidence, not the fake, she presented. Madison is embezzling from the company. Daniel was genuinely surprised. For years, small amounts, building offshore accounts, just like she accused you of. Edward coughed violently, and Celia rushed in to adjust his oxygen. When he could speak again, his voice was fainter. Gloria knows, has been covering, protecting her. Why tell me this now? Edward's gaze, suddenly sharp despite his failing body, fixed on Daniel. Because you're right. You're nothing like me. Better. Stronger in ways that matter. He reached for Daniel's hand with surprising strength. The company needs you, not Madison, not Gloria's puppets. Daniel withdrew his hand. You don't get to play the repentant patriarch now, not after what you've done. Not asking. Forgiveness. Edward wheezed. Too late for that. Asking you to save. What's worth saving? His breathing grew more labored. Look in my safe. Combination. Your birthday, evidence against Madison, and something else. For you. Celia stepped forward again. As Edward's oxygen levels dropped dangerously, he needs to rest, she said firmly. Daniel stood. One more question. Do you know where Linda is? Edward shook his head weakly. Find her. Tell her, I'm sorry. Too little. Too late. His eyes fluttered closed. Like father, like son, I ruined both your lives. As Daniel turned to leave, Edward spoke once more, so softly Daniel almost missed it. The recording, take it insurance. In the hallway, Celia handed Daniel a small device. The cardiac monitor records everything within range. It uploads to a secure server, but this is a direct copy. She looked over her shoulder nervously. If Gloria knew I gave you this, she won't find out from me, Daniel assured her. How long does he have? Days, maybe hours. Celia's professional demeanor cracked slightly. Despite everything, I've been with him 15 years. It's strange to think. I understand, Daniel said, surprising himself by meaning it. Edward was a monster, but he had been the only grandfather Daniel had ever known. Complicated emotions swirled beneath his anger. In Edward's study, Daniel opened the hidden wall safe using his birth date. Inside, he found a flash drive labeled Madison, and beneath it, a velvet jewelry box. Opening it, he discovered a gold pocket watch with the Hawthorne crest. A handwritten note accompanied it. Benjamin's, he was wearing it the day you were born. I took it before the funeral. Meant for his son. Daniel closed his hand around the watch, feeling its weight. the only gift he would ever receive from his biological father. Despite everything, something long empty inside him responded to this tangible connection to Benjamin. As he drove back to the city, the storm intensified, rain lashing his windshield. His phone rang through the car's speakers. An unknown number. Daniel Hawthorne speaking. Mr. Hawthorne. A male voice, unfamiliar. You don't know me. I work security at Mercy Hospital. There's a woman here who was brought in last night. No, unconscious. When she woke up an hour ago, she asked for you. Daniel's heart lurched. What's her name? Linda Caldwell. She was found beaten in Grant Park. Someone tried very hard to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Daniel swerved to the side of the road, rain hammering on the roof. I'm on my way. Tell her I'm coming. As he hung up, lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the lake in a moment of stark clarity. In that flash, Daniel saw his path forward, not just to find Linda, but to end the cycle of Hawthorne cruelty once and for all. Linda looked smaller than Daniel remembered, lying in the hospital bed with bruises darkening one side of her face and an IV dripping steadily into her arm. Despite her injuries, her eyes brightened when Daniel entered the room. You shouldn't have come, she said weakly. It's not safe. Daniel pulled a chair to her bedside. What happened? The security guard said you were found in Grant Park. Linda winced as she shifted position. 2 men. They were waiting at Celia's sister's house when I went back for my things. Said they had a message from Gloria Hawthorne. Her hand trembled slightly. When I tried to run, they grabbed me. Next thing I remember was waking up here. Rage burned through Daniel, white hot and consuming. Gloria won't get away with this. You can't fight them, Linda insisted. The Hawthornes have too much power, too many connections. That's why I left, to keep you safe. I'm not the one in a hospital bed, Daniel pointed out gently. He hesitated, then reached for her hand. Linda, Mom, I'm not going to disappear from your life again. We've lost too much time already. Tears welled in Linda's eyes at the word Mom. She squeezed his hand. You don't know what they're capable of. Your grandfather. Edward is dying, Daniel interrupted. He had another stroke before I came here. He confessed everything. Benjamin's death, his role in keeping us apart. He didn't mention Catherine's accident, unwilling to add to Linda's distress. It's all recorded. Evidence we can use. Evidence of what? Linda asked. Of decades of manipulation, lies, and criminal acts by the Hawthorne family, Daniel replied. Edward also gave me proof of Madison's embezzlement. Linda looked unconvinced. And you think that will stop them, Daniel? Gloria's second husband had connections to organized crime. These aren't people who worry about evidence or legal consequences. Then we'll have to be smarter, Daniel said firmly. I'm not letting them hurt you again. I'm not letting them take anything else from us. A nurse entered to check Linda's vitals, and Daniel stepped into the hallway to make a call. When he returned, his expression was resolute. I've arranged for private security, he told Linda. And as soon as you're discharged, you're coming to stay at my penthouse. It has the best security system in Chicago. Linda shook her head. I'll only put you in more danger. I'm already in danger, Daniel countered. Madison wants my position. Gloria wants to protect her daughter, and they both see me as an obstacle. Having you close doesn't change that. It just means I can protect you better. A doctor interrupted them, explaining that Linda had suffered a mild concussion and 2 broken ribs, but could be released the following day with proper care. When they were alone again, Linda studied Daniel's face. You look just like him sometimes, she said softly. Benjamin, especially when you're determined about something. Daniel felt an unexpected warmth at the comparison. Tell me about him, please. Not what Catherine wrote or what Edward claimed, what he was really like. Linda's expression softened with memory. He was kind, genuinely kind. In a world that valued sharpness and ambition, he loved poetry, believe it or not. Used to read Neruda to me in the garden when no one was watching. She smiled faintly. Edward thought he was weak because he cared about people more than profit margins. But Benjamin had a different kind of strength. What happened between you? Daniel asked. How did it start? I was just the new maid, 18, naive, saving for college. Benjamin had just finished at Yale and was working at the company under Edward's supervision. He hated it. Linda's gaze grew distant. One day, I dropped a tray of tea in the library instead of getting angry like Dorothy would have. Benjamin helped me clean up. After that, he started finding reasons to be around when I was working. She told Daniel about their secret romance, conducted in whispered conversations and stolen moments. How Benjamin had talked about leaving the family business, taking his trust fund, and starting a life with her somewhere far from Chicago. How Dorothy had discovered Linda's pregnancy and orchestrated her removal from the house, threatening to have her arrested for theft if she resisted. "I only saw you once after you were born," Linda said, her voice breaking. "Dorothy let me hold you for 2 minutes before they took you away. I counted your fingers and toes. You were so perfect." She blinked back tears. "Before she threw me out, Dorothy said, 'Remember, girl, you're nobody. If you ever try to see this child, I'll destroy you.'" Daniel's throat tightened painfully. "But you never stopped looking." Linda shook her head. "Never. Catherine helped, though I didn't know it at the time. After you turned 18, she started sending me photographs, school records, through intermediaries, of course." "She felt guilty," Daniel said. "Her journal is full of it. She was trapped too. In her way," Linda replied. "When I finally found you 3 years ago, I just wanted to see you for myself, to know you were okay. Working at your building wasn't part of the plan, but when the opportunity came, you took a job cleaning toilets just to be near me," Daniel said, the realization hitting him anew. "Even when I was," he couldn't finish the sentence, shame washing over him as he remembered how he'd treated her. "You didn't know," Linda said simply, "and I got to see you every day. It was enough." But it wasn't enough, Daniel thought. Not nearly enough to compensate for what she'd lost, what they'd both lost. "We need to end this," he said firmly. "The board meeting tomorrow is our opportunity to expose everything. Madison's embezzlement, Edward's confession, all of it." "And then what?" Linda asked. "Even if you win, Gloria won't stop." "I have a plan for Gloria too," Daniel assured her, "but I need your help." The next morning, Daniel returned to his penthouse to prepare for the decisive board meeting. Linda remained in the hospital for one more day, guarded by the security team he'd hired, former military personnel who wouldn't be easily intimidated by Gloria's connections. In his home office, Daniel spread out the evidence he'd gathered. Edward's recorded confession, the flash drive with proof of Madison's financial misdeeds, Catherine's journals, the settlement agreement Dorothy had forced on Linda, and a detailed timeline of the Hawthorne family's decades of deception. It was damning, but Linda was right. People like Gloria and Madison operated outside normal constraints of law and ethics. Evidence alone wouldn't stop them. His phone rang. "Celia, he's gone," she said quietly. "Edward passed 20 minutes ago. Gloria was with him." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Despite everything, a complicated grief tugged at him. "Thank you for letting me know." "There's something else," Celia added. "Before he died, Edward changed his will. The lawyer was here yesterday. I don't know the details, but Gloria was furious. She was shouting at him even as he was slipping away." After hanging up, Daniel sat motionless, absorbing this new development, Edward's final move in their complex game. But was it in Daniel's favor or against him? A message appeared on his phone. Security downstairs announcing a visitor. The doorman's camera showed a small, weathered woman in her 60s, whom Daniel didn't recognize. "Send her up," he instructed, curious. Minutes later, he opened his door to find a Hispanic woman clutching a weathered leather portfolio. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said with a faint accent. "My name is Rosa Diaz. I was your father's housekeeper, Benjamin Hawthorne's." Daniel ushered her in, stunned. "How did you find me?" "I've always known where you were," Rosa replied. "Linda and I kept in touch over the years. She called me from the hospital this morning, said it was finally time." She placed the portfolio on his coffee table. "For 21 years, I've kept these safe. Benjamin gave them to me the day before he died. Said if anything happened to him, I should keep them hidden until his child was old enough to understand." Daniel opened the portfolio with trembling hands. Inside were letters, photographs, and a handwritten journal. Benjamin's journal. "He knew they might try to stop him from finding you and Linda," Rosa explained. "He documented everything. Conversations with Edward, threats from Dorothy, his plans to leave the family, and there's something else. She withdrew a small cassette tape. His final testimony, as Rosa left, promising to meet him at the board meeting the next day. Daniel cradled the journal in his hands. For the first time in days, he felt a surge of hope. With Benjamin's voice added to the evidence, they might finally have enough to end the Hawthorne reign of manipulation and fear. Not just for Linda and himself, but for Benjamin too, the father he'd never known, whose strength had been so profoundly misunderstood. The Hawthorne Group's main boardroom had been designed to intimidate. 40-foot ceilings, walls of glass overlooking Chicago, and a table of polished ebony long enough to seat 30. Today, every chair was filled as board members, major shareholders, and executive leadership gathered for what had been billed as an emergency succession planning meeting. Following Edward Hawthorne's death, Daniel stood alone at the windows, watching a pair of hawks circle above the city, despite the sleepless night. He felt strangely calm, the calm that comes after accepting that everything is about to change irrevocably. "Bold of you to show your face," Madison said, appearing at his side. She wore black, ostensibly for Edward's funeral the following day, but the effect was more predatory than mournful. "Grandfather's body isn't even cold, and you're already making your move." "I didn't call this meeting," Daniel reminded her. "Your mother did. A formality." Madison waved dismissively. "After today, you'll be escorted from the building, and I'll be named interim CEO." She lowered her voice. "How's your cleaning lady? Heard she had a nasty fall." Daniel turned to face her fully, maintaining careful control. "Tell Gloria that if anything else happens to Linda, what I'm about to reveal today will seem like a courtesy call." Madison's smile faltered slightly before she could respond. Gloria swept into the room, commanding attention with her presence alone. Behind her came a distinguished man in an expensive suit. Martin Reynolds, Gloria's second husband, rarely seen at company functions. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gloria announced, taking Edward's former place at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming on this difficult day. With my father's passing, it's essential we address leadership continuity immediately." She nodded toward Daniel. "Given recent revelations about Daniel's parentage, the board must consider whether he remains suitable to lead this company." Janet Wong, still the most respected board member, spoke up. "Gloria, with all due respect, we've already acknowledged that Daniel's technical status as Benjamin's son still qualifies him as a Hawthorne descendant under the charter." "Perhaps," Gloria conceded, "but new information has come to light," she signaled to Reynolds, who distributed folders around the table. "These documents show extensive financial improprieties under Daniel's leadership. Not the fabricated evidence Madison prematurely presented, but actual proof of mismanagement and self-dealing." Daniel opened his folder, finding meticulously forged bank statements and transaction records. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to create the appearance of malfeasance. "Additionally," Gloria continued, "with Edward's passing, certain personal matters have emerged that call Daniel's judgment into question. His association with Linda Caldwell, a woman with a documented history of attempting to extort money from our family, represents a clear conflict of interest." "That's a lie," Daniel said quietly, but firmly enough to capture the room's attention. "Linda never attempted extortion. She was paid to disappear and keep silent about being my birth mother. A settlement arranged by Dorothy Hawthorne and enforced through threats." Gloria's smile was glacial. "An unsubstantiated claim from a woman of questionable character." "Actually," Daniel countered, "it's fully substantiated." He opened his briefcase and removed a document, handing copies to Janet Wong and several other board members. "This is the original settlement agreement Dorothy forced Linda to sign 21 years ago. Note the clause threatening legal action if she ever attempted to contact me." As the board members examined the document, Daniel continued, "For those wondering about my legitimacy as CEO, I'd like to clarify exactly who I am." He moved to the center of the room, commanding the space as he'd been trained to do since business school. "I am biologically the son of Benjamin Hawthorne and Linda Caldwell. I was taken from Linda at birth and given to Catherine and Robert to raise under the orchestration of Dorothy and Edward Hawthorne." Murmurs rippled through the room, but Daniel pressed on. "Benjamin didn't abandon Linda or me. He was planning to leave the company, claim his child, and marry Linda, until his convenient accident on Lake Michigan ended those plans." He paused, letting the implication sink in. "An accident where Edward was the only witness. This is outrageous." Gloria slammed her hand on the table. "You dare accuse my father of murder without a shred of evidence?" "I have Edward's confession," Daniel replied calmly, holding up a small recording device. "Made yesterday, hours before his death, and witnessed by his nurse." He pressed play, and Edward's raspy voice filled the room. About the boat, what Catherine suspected was true. Fight on the boat. Benjamin said he was going to find Linda. Claim you. Marry her. Create scandal. I tried to reason with him. Pushed him overboard during an argument. Watched him go under. Didn't help. God forgive me. I didn't help. Gasps and horrified whispers erupted as the recording continued, including Edward's admission about Gloria's role in covering up Madison's embezzlement. Gloria's face had gone white with fury. "This recording is obviously doctored. My father was heavily medicated, not in his right mind." "Perhaps," Daniel acknowledged, "but his testimony isn't the only evidence." He nodded toward the door, where Celia stood with Rosa Diaz and a man no one recognized. No one. "Allow me to introduce Rosa Diaz, Benjamin's former housekeeper, and Thomas Mercer, the detective Catherine hired 5 years ago to investigate Benjamin's death and find Linda." As they entered, Reynolds leaned toward Gloria, whispering urgently. She shook her head sharply, her composure cracking. "Before Benjamin died," Daniel continued, "he recorded his own testament about Edward's threats and gave it to Rosa for safekeeping, along with his journal detailing Edward's increasingly hostile behavior. And Mr. Mercer's investigation uncovered witness testimony from a fisherman who saw 2 men struggling on a boat the day Benjamin died, directly contradicting Edward's story about a sudden squall." Madison stood abruptly. "This is all ancient history. Even if it were true, it has no bearing on Daniel's fitness to lead this company now." "On the contrary," Daniel replied, "it establishes a pattern of deception and criminality that continues to this day." He turned to the board members. "The financial documents Gloria just presented are forgeries, created to frame me. Just as Madison attempted earlier, the real financial impropriety belongs to Madison herself." He inserted Edward's flash drive into the boardroom's presentation system. On the massive screen appeared transaction records, bank statements, and offshore account details, all linked to Madison. Edward discovered Madison's embezzlement months ago, but kept it quiet. "He gave me this evidence yesterday, perhaps as his version of atonement." Madison's face drained of color. That's not nearly $12 million over 5 years," Daniel continued relentlessly. "Siphoned through a complex network of shell companies ultimately controlled by Madison Hawthorne." The boardroom erupted in chaos. Several board members surrounded Madison, demanding explanations. Others huddled with legal counsel present at the meeting. Through it all, Gloria remained stonily silent, her eyes locked on Daniel with pure hatred. As the tumult continued, the boardroom doors opened once more. Every head turned as Linda Caldwell entered, still bearing the visible bruises from her accident. Despite her injuries, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Behind her came a police detective and 2 uniformed officers. "Linda," Daniel moved quickly to her side. "You should be in the hospital." "I needed to be here," she said simply. "For both of us." The detective stepped forward. "I'm Detective Ramirez, Chicago PD. We're here to speak with Gloria Hawthorne Reynolds and Madison Hawthorne regarding an assault investigation." Gloria stood, radiating icy composure despite the collapse of her plans. "This is a private corporate meeting. Whatever business you have can wait." "I'm afraid it can't." "Mrs. Hawthorne Reynolds," the detective replied, "we have witnesses connecting you to the men who assaulted Mrs. Caldwell, as well as financial transactions showing payments from your personal account to these individuals." Reynolds moved protectively toward Gloria, but the officers intercepted him. "Mr. Reynolds," the detective continued, "given your record and ongoing probation, I suggest you don't interfere." As the officers approached Gloria and Madison, Janet Wong called for order. "In light of these extraordinary developments, I move that we immediately suspend this meeting and reconvene after a full investigation of all allegations presented today." "Seconded," another board member called out. "All in favor?" Janet asked. Nearly every hand in the room rose. The motion passes. This meeting is adjourned until further notice, with Daniel Hawthorne continuing as CEO pending investigation results. As the board members filed out, many casting backward glances at the unfolding police action. Daniel stood with Linda, his hand gently supporting her elbow. "Is it really over?" she asked quietly. Daniel watched as Gloria and Madison were escorted from the room, their carefully constructed world of privilege and impunity crumbling around them. "Not yet," he answered honestly, "but it's a beginning." For the first time since discovering the truth about his parentage, Daniel felt something like peace washing over him, not because he'd won a corporate battle, but because finally, after 21 years, he was standing beside his mother without pretense or fear. The empire might still be at stake, but he'd found something far more valuable. 6 months later, Daniel stood at the podium of the newly dedicated Benjamin Hawthorne Memorial Center for Family Reunification. Spring sunshine streamed through the building's glass atrium, illuminating the gathered crowd of supporters, media, and beneficiaries of the center's programs. "Family isn't just about blood or names," Daniel said, his voice carrying through the space. "It's about love, sacrifice, and sometimes finding your way back to each other against impossible odds." From her seat in the front row, Linda smiled up at him, pride shining in her eyes. The bruises from her assault had long since healed, but the experience had left other marks, a new wariness in crowded places, a tendency to startle at sudden movements. The psychological wounds would take longer to heal than the physical ones, but she was working through them with the same quiet determination that had sustained her for 21 years of searching. "This center," Daniel continued, "will provide legal assistance, counseling, and support to families separated by poverty, immigration issues, or legal complications. No parent should have to clean an office building at night just to catch glimpses of their child." His voice caught slightly. "And no child should grow up without knowing the truth of where they come from." The months following Edward's death and Gloria's arrest had been tumultuous. Madison had accepted a plea deal, testifying against her mother in exchange for a reduced sentence for her embezzlement. Gloria, facing charges ranging from conspiracy to assault, had fought with every legal resource at her disposal. But the evidence, including testimony from the men she'd hired to attack Linda, had been overwhelming. She was currently awaiting sentencing. The Hawthorne Group had survived the scandal, thanks largely to Daniel's swift and transparent handling of the crisis. He'd established an independent board committee to investigate all aspects of the company's past dealings, voluntarily disclosed the family's misconduct to authorities, and implemented sweeping governance reforms, rather than diminishing the company. These actions had ultimately strengthened it. The stock price, after an initial plunge, had rebounded to record highs as investors responded positively to the new era of accountability. As Daniel concluded his remarks and stepped away from the podium, Linda joined him for the ceremonial ribbon cutting. Together, they officially opened the center that would become Linda's life's work, her way of helping others who had experienced separation and loss similar to her own. "Benjamin would be so proud," she whispered as they posed for photographs, "of the center, but mostly of you." Daniel squeezed her hand in response, still getting used to these moments of maternal affection that had once been unimaginable to him. Later, as the reception wound down, Janet Wong approached them, now the chairwoman of the Hawthorne Group's board. She had been a crucial ally in rebuilding the company's reputation. "Impressive work," she said, nodding toward the center's bustling common area, where families and social workers mingled. "Though I must say, your grandfather would be turning in his grave if he could see Hawthorne money funding social services." "My grandfather believed in investing in the future," Daniel replied with a small smile. "He just had a very narrow view of what that future should look like." "Speaking of the future," Janet said more seriously, "the board is unanimously behind your proposal to rename the company Hawthorne Group. Has a nice ring to it." Linda shook her head. "I still think it's unnecessary. The Hawthorne name has recognition, history. A history we're rewriting," Daniel interjected gently. "Starting now." As Janet excused herself to speak with other attendees, Daniel guided Linda toward a quieter corner of the reception. "I have something for you," he said, retrieving a small gift box from his pocket. "I've been waiting for the right moment." Linda opened it curiously, then gasped. Inside lay the original gold medallion, the one she had placed around infant Daniel's neck 21 years ago, that Dorothy had wanted to discard, but Catherine had secretly kept. "I thought it should come back to you," Daniel explained. Since you were the one who gave it to me first. Linda traced the medallion's surface with trembling fingers. It was my mother's, she said softly. The only thing of value she ever owned. She gave it to me when I turned 16. Said it would protect me. Her eyes glistened. When they took you away, I wanted you to have that protection. Even if I couldn't be there myself. Daniel helped her fasten the chain around her neck, where the medallion caught the light. Now it's back where it belongs, he said. That evening, they shared a quiet dinner at Daniel's penthouse. Now their shared home, though Linda maintained her own small apartment, needing a space that felt entirely hers after decades of displacement. I was thinking, Daniel said as they sat on the terrace watching the sunset over Lake Michigan, about taking some time off, maybe traveling. There's so much of your life I don't know about, so many years to catch up on. Linda looked surprised. What about the company? The company will survive without me for a few weeks, Daniel replied. Janet's more than capable of handling things temporarily. He hesitated. I found Catherine's vacation home in Martha's Vineyard while going through some old papers. It's peaceful there. Isolated. Might be a good place to talk. Really talk. Without distractions. Linda nodded slowly. I'd like that. She paused. There's something I've been wanting to show you, actually. I've been waiting for the right time, too. She retrieved her bag and pulled out a weathered, leather-bound album. I started this the day after they took you, she explained, placing it on the table between them. It helped me feel connected somehow, even when I didn't know where you were. Daniel opened the album carefully. The first page held a single lock of baby hair, tied with blue ribbon, labeled simply, My Son, 1986. The following pages contained empty spaces where photographs should have been, with handwritten notes imagining milestones. First steps, first words. Did you say Mama or Dada first? As he turned the pages, the empty spaces gradually gave way to actual content. Newspaper clippings of the Hawthorne family at society events, with child Daniel sometimes visible in the background. School program listings with his name highlighted. A grainy photograph of him at a rowing competition, circled in red ink. Catherine sent these, Linda explained, through intermediaries, never directly. She never included a note, but I knew they were from her. The later pages documented Daniel's adult life in remarkable detail. His Harvard graduation, business achievements, charity events, even casual paparazzi shots of him with various girlfriends at restaurants or clubs. How did you get all these? He asked, amazed at the thoroughness of her collection. Once I found you, it wasn't difficult, Linda replied. You're a public figure, business journals, society pages, social media. I collected everything I could find. She smiled sadly. It was a poor substitute for knowing you, but it was something. Daniel turned to the last page, finding a recent photograph of the two of them at the hospital, taken by a nurse the day he'd found her after the assault. Despite her injuries, Linda was smiling, her hand clasped tightly in Daniel's. Beneath it, she had written, After 21 years, not just a photograph, but a memory we share, the first of many. We have a lot of time to make up for, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. Linda touched his hand gently. We have now. That's what matters. As they sat together watching the last light fade from the sky, Daniel reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He had lost, and found not only a mother, but himself, the truth of who he was beyond the Hawthorne name and legacy. The empire Edward had killed to protect still stood, but transformed by truth, rather than destroyed by it. And Daniel, once its reluctant heir, had discovered a different kind of inheritance. Benjamin's compassion, Linda's determination, and perhaps even a small measure of Catherine's courage in eventually choosing truth over comfort. What are you thinking about? Linda asked.